Hi, I'm Tony Williams, and this is Brooklyn Savvy. Hi, I'm Tony Williams, and welcome to Brooklyn Savvy. We are delighted to have Farah Tanis with us of the Black Woman's Blueprint, and real exciting website, fantastic work. But before we get into talking about you and your organization, I want to introduce our panelistas. We have Colette Ellis, Maria De Longoria, and Lisa Beam. So Farah, talk to us about the Black Woman's Blueprint. What is that? Because the name is so provocative, and it's a loaded question, you know, because if one goes to the website, you can see just how many stages and phases this is. But talk to us about what this is.
The Black Women's Blueprint is a national organization, and when you say the name is provocative, it is. It was intentionally named the Blueprint, right? And it's a blueprint by Black women. And so when it was started around a really political time, right? So very much political time when Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were vying for the Democratic Party nomination. And so the conversation—
In 2008.
In 2008. And so the idea came about around that time of conflict, around that time of questioning that Black women were experiencing. Are we voting our race or are we voting our gender? As if you can separate the two.
I was going to say.
Right? And so we said, okay, so we started to pay more and more attention as we were also dealing with our own— a lot of us were already stewing in our own rage in the sense that, what do you mean are we voting our race or gender? How do you split up or separate what Black women are?
And I see my race sometimes first and my gender second.
Well, we see our race and gender and our class and our nationhood as inextricably linked.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And so we could never place one above the other because the oppression that we face and that we experience as a result of one is also inextricably linked with the oppression that we experience as a result of the other. So as a Black woman, even if we went back to the antebellum South, right? The experiences of racism, it was extremely gendered for us, right? The forced breeding, the sexual assaults at a very young age, right? Our girls were constantly in danger. And so slavery for a Black woman was very different than it was for a Black man. Same thing with the Jim Crow, post-emancipation, during the voting era, even today, right? So our blueprint, when we said we want to create a blueprint that is about Black women, we meant it. We said it's a blueprint that will consider all of the various identities and all of the various oppressions that these identities produce, but also all of the stories and narratives of triumph and liberation and civil rights and protest and nation building that Black women have been involved in. These represent a blueprint for us that we are building on. Thus, the Black Women's Blueprint.
So what is your view when it comes to feminism? Because you speak of feminism, I think you talk about transnational feminism.
That's right.
So when we speak of feminism in a larger sense, in a broader sense, how do you compare that to the feminism that Black women are dealing with or viewing?
That's an interesting question. Feminism in the broader sense, I think, is the feminism that everyone sees, right? We call it mainstream feminism. Some folks call it white feminism.
Right. I was going to say that, but I didn't. You know, some Black women relate to it.
And some Black women relate to it, and some Black women don't, right? And then there's, of course, Alice Walker's womanism, right? Which is sort of a different view, offering Black women a different way of looking at their activism and their struggle for their own rights. But when I think of feminism, really it simply means looking at the humanity and valuing the humanity of women equally, as equally as you would value the humanity of men or anyone of any gender who represents and manifests in any way, you know, on this earth. And so for us, this is what feminism means. I think that's what feminism means. It should mean everywhere, right? For Black women, we look at intersectionality. We look at sort of like, you know, the various levels of identity. But
Intersectionality.
Yes.
Could you explain that? Elaborate, please.
Intersectionality is really this concept that really goes way back to Sojourner Truth, if not before, right? When Sojourner Truth said, "Ain't I a woman?" You know, she was speaking to Black men who were fighting for their right to vote, and saying, "Ain't I a woman?" She was also speaking to white women who were fighting for their right to vote. Right? She was saying, "And I a woman, I can do as I labor as hard as a man." You know, I'm a woman too. And however, white women are the ones who have their jackets thrown on the ground when there's a puddle of water. No one helps me into carriages, right? And so she was talking about that. That was the first articulation that we know of. And then the Combahee River Collective also articulated an intersectionality that spoke to sexuality and the various identities, going deeper into what it meant to look at class oppression.
So when you're talking intersectionality, you're talking about bringing the bringing together of all the parts of ourselves.
All the parts of us, all of the various
not separating them
identities,
out.
from sex, class, gender, sexuality, gender identity, all of those things. And Kim Crenshaw also is the person who coined the term intersectionality, although the notion existed way before Kim Crenshaw.
Now, in your website, you spoke about power and how this movement is to energize Black women
right.
and to understand our power. Talk
right.
about that.
When you think about Black women's power, we can go back again, and I always steep everything I say in a historical context, right?
I appreciate
We have
that.
constantly, I mean, we have had
You're telling
power.
stories. I'm listening.
We've had power before we could understand, or before anyone ever articulated it for us.
What was
we
that?
knew what it was. We can talk about Ida B. Wells. We can talk about brave women like Harriet Tubman. I mean, we recently
So how are you defining power, though?
We're defining power as something that is inherently ours by virtue of the fact that we were born human, by virtue of the fact that we have a spirituality. So that power can emanate from anywhere. It can emanate from acts, of course. You know, we can say, "Oh, you're powerful because you protested," or you run for office and you become this powerful person who makes major decisions. But spiritually, we're grounded in a place that says that we need to be free and we long to be free. So if you act on that and if you speak on that, that is power. So power really is in every fiber of us, is in everything that we do, especially as Black women.
So are you saying then that power is the ability to affect a change, have an impact on a person, place, or thing?
And on ourselves.
Right.
It
Well, we would be
also
the
means we
person,
can
yeah.
transform ourselves as well. Right? And in many ways,
So the
Black
ability
women.
to bring something into fruition.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that we as Black women are imbued with that as naturally.
We embody it, we deploy it in many ways. So when folks talk about
like deploy
empowerment,
it.
we do deploy it. We do
Well, when
deploy
we
it.
understand that we have it.
Right.
When we understand that we have it, and even when we don't. It's, you know, you don't need to understand that you have power to have power.
Well,
I
understood,
hear
but
what
to
you're saying.
deploy it.
Yeah.
But in order to deploy
In order
the
to
power,
deploy it,
because
exactly.
I see, because I
That's
see a
right.
lot of women and men too, frankly, to leave their power on the table,
Absolutely.
right? And you're asking for permission to do things.
Absolutely.
I can't do it. It's not for me. Those are sort of the powerlessness, the ways that our powerlessness shows up.
Exactly, or learned powerlessness, right?
So for me, everything that I'm hearing, you know, are things that traditionally, as you said, Black women have always been, right? And so it brings my question: then why the term feminist? And because everything that you talked about doesn't match the historical or the traditional definition of feminism, right? And so for me, having this Black woman's blueprint, which is, I think, is in itself, right, such an empowering
Idea.
Yeah, it is, and it I can't think of the right word I'm trying to use, but it's something that's phenomenal, right? And the understanding of it and embracing of it. And then when you say it's this transnationalist feminist movement, for me, that mixing it or combining it or conjoining it with feminism just evokes the more traditional and historical and even current definitions of feminism. And I'm kind of struggling with that a little bit.
And I completely understand that. And what we ask folks to do is to look at Black women's blueprint and then define feminism by what you see and by what you experience, with Black women being at the forefront and Black women thinking about themselves and being in defense of themselves and their communities. The reason we chose to align ourselves, some do and some don't, with feminism and womanism is because we wanted to make sure we defined and we carved out a space specifically for ourselves that didn't say that your race comes first. That didn't say that you had to think about Black men and everyone else before yourself. And so that is why, we said it needs to be something that focuses specifically and that highlights our womanhood.
So then my question still is then, though, that term feminism, because there is womanism, there's Africana womanism, there are a lot of different isms, right, that have been developed. And so I'm just curious why, again, then you chose to embrace something that was there as opposed to perhaps developing a new ism or something that was more reflected more of an embodiment of Black women's unique position.
Absolutely. And
as opposed to taking on the connotations of feminism, right? Yeah.
Since it hadn't worked before. And I'm not saying it's not going to work now, I'm just curious.
Well, I think that Black feminism has worked for us, right? Because we have shifted, the landscape as far as feminism is concerned, right? With Black feminism and with intersectional feminism, we've shifted that. With volitional feminism, meaning the agency that we deploy, that has shifted that, right? And it's not to say that we've adopted the term, although we unapologetically say that we are Black feminists, we haven't necessarily adopted the term. I think that we were feminists before the term even came into existence. I think that with every single act of resistance that we engaged in, we were feminists before the term existed. Just because white women took the term and created it doesn't mean that we weren't feminists, right? When you think about the definition
We were.
and who we are,
yes.
right? We could call it anything.
Right. So the label aside, what's the end game here? So
The mission, I imagine.
Right. I mean, right.
The end game for us is for every single person, and I don't just say women and girl, right? For every single person to live to their full potential, to be humanized, right? We had a young man earlier who talked about what it meant to be a Black man and what it meant to be a boy, and talked about emotional intelligence, talked about being able to feel your humanity fully and to step into that and step into every possibility of that. That is the end game, right? So that's the end game in terms of personal transformation.
And so what does it look like when I'm feeling my humanity?
When you are feeling your humanity, you are advocating for your sister.
Right.
For your sister.
And for yourself.
And your voice. It's about that
and
voice.
you are deploying your voice in service of community, whether it's on education, whether it's on reproductive health, whether it's on maternal health.
I guess it's about informing
all
yourself,
of it.
too,
Whether
informed.
whether it's on
Informing
economic
yourself.
justice. So it's really about that. The end game is for all of us to live in equity, is for all of our human rights to be respected, is for violence to end in our communities.